Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk NODEsense podcast. This is block 2 in the series. We just had a great conversation with Chris and Toufiq, founder and co-founder at Totem Live Accounting.
They're close to finishing a product that is truly revolutionary, a software that brings more transparency and promotes ethical behavior when running a business.
We also talked about how companies will be able to adopt this software, use any currency they desire to operate in, and not even know they're using blockchain technology to ensure safety and privacy like never before.
And they're doing this all while removing all the traditional accounting stuff that piles up on people's desks.
So as always, I'm Cooper.
And I'm Arrow.
We hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, and thank you both for coming onto the podcast with us. For everyone listening in on Spotify, Apple Music, or YouTube, we're joined by founder Chris and co-founder Toufiq, both from the focus of this episode, Totem Live Accounting. So first of all, thank you both for taking the time at your schedules to talk to us. Let's start off with a brief introduction about the project and maybe even a little background on how it all started, guys.
Okay, so I founded Totem Accounting back in 2018, but the project has quite some history. It goes back basically to around 2014. I've been involved with the crypto space since 2013, and it came out of a failed project back in 2014 where we were working on a point of sale Bitcoin device, and kind of the market crashed at the time, but the point of sale device itself obviously had to record the information into the accounts, and this was one of the problems that we were dealing with. And so over a number of years we sort of looked into the different possibilities that were out there, and our white paper came out in 2016, and it wasn't until 2018 with the advent of the Substrate development kit from Parity that we realized that was the opportunity that we had to build this concept of peer-to-peer accounting, which came out of all of the previous work that we'd done. And so we've basically been building since then in the Polkadot ecosystem.
Interesting. Yeah. And Toufiq, how about yourself?
Yeah, I myself worked as a web developer, front-end and back-end before, and in 2018, Chris contacted me. He wanted to build the prototype for our application, and that's how I started. And then later on, I became the co-founder.
Awesome. So just building on top of what Chris was talking about there. So when you came up with the idea for Totem, and without Polkadot, how was the Web3 vision? How was it visioned back then when Polkadot wasn't really, happening, and the decentralization wasn't there? What were you guys thinking on how to accomplish that part before Polkadot?
Before Polkadot existed, obviously there was Ethereum, which came out in 2014, and one of the parts to Ethereum that most people kind of don't realize exists is this notion of pre-compiled contracts. These aren't smart contracts. These are basically the runtime of the Ethereum network itself. And this concept of being able to perhaps create a fork of Ethereum and then adapt some of those pre-compiled contracts, or even build our own to create specific functionality for a blockchain, was something that had been in the back of our minds. And in fact, the very first attempts at this were on a fork of Ethereum. The problem with that, of course, is that you're also having to deal with constructing of a whole blockchain and dealing with things like peer-to-peer networking and all of the other things that go along with creating a blockchain. The reason why we sort of switched to Substrate in the end was essentially because of the way in which it's designed. It's basically designed to allow you to create specific palettes, as they're known now, but that was effectively the equivalent of a pre-compiled contract, and allow you to build any kind of business logic into those palettes and run it on a blockchain which was essentially pre-configured for you. So all the peer-to-peer networking, all the consensus mechanisms within a blockchain, the address mechanism, the balances transfer, all of that kind of thing was taken care of by the Substrate SDK, and we just had to provide the business logic. And these palettes allowed us to build the kind of business logic that we needed to have to kind of show what this peer-to-peer accounting mechanism could look like. Because until then, there has not actually been, in fact, anything like peer-to-peer accounting. What you tend to have is isolated accounting systems, but peer-to-peer accounting is something completely different. It allows peers to talk to each other or allow them to share accounting information directly with each other rather than sort of sending invoices by email or whatever it might be. We can actually do that directly peer-to-peer, which is a sort of an important development.
Yeah, very interesting. So I guess the point to hit home on there is it's basically an impossible task outside of the substrate by the sound of things.
It's an impossible task without using a blockchain. Well, actually, probably impossible is too strong a word because, you know, probably nothing is impossible. But generally speaking, you could have a centralized accounting system that could allow peers to share information between each other. But those, and in fact, I would sort of say that some accounting systems do that today, but they're inside the walled garden of that accounting software. And unless the other party uses that accounting software, there's no way to share the information outside of the system. So what blockchain brings to that kind of whole discussion and idea is the fact that it's completely permissionless. You don't need to be running the software to actually interact with it. You only need an address, a blockchain address, and that's as much as you need. The rest is enforced by the blockchain itself. All the rules that you might sort of want to deal with in terms of sort of making accounting postings are just an elaboration of what a blockchain does natively anyway. When you send a financial transaction on a blockchain, all you're doing essentially is debiting one party and crediting another. So that's a very simple view of what happens in a blockchain, but you can elaborate on that, and that's what we're building on, the idea that you can sort of build in much more complex rules and have the network enforce those rules, and the network will arrive at consensus over the truth of the data before it gets stored in the blockchain itself.
Interesting. So I guess at a high level, what's the process for a business or company onboarding themselves to use Totem as their accounting or reconciliation program?
Well, at the moment, we're still a work in progress. So there's probably, I would say, about another 6 months worth of work to do before a company can properly sort of use it end to end. But at the moment, we've created a very low barrier for entry. So there's basically 2 steps. They visit the site, for example, and they create an identity and they create a chat user identity. And that's it. Once they've done that, they can begin to use the system pretty much straight away. Obviously, we have the notion of how transactions are paid for, and of course we have the internal currency of the network allows for transactions to be paid for. But that's, in a nutshell, that's all there is to it. Essentially, visiting the site, creating yourself an identity, which is a blockchain address, and creating a chat user ID.
Okay. And when a company would, make an address and get on there, if they're not really like a crypto, centered type of company, would they just be able to interact only with like fiat currencies and not have to get into, learning the internal currency and switching in and out of crypto and stuff like that? Would they be able to just use US dollars right from the get-go and just stay in there and just get the benefits of Totem's like software?
We've made a big effort from the beginning to kind of hide, but not sort of make impossible to see, obviously, hide the crypto and blockchain aspect of it. And that's partly because within the accounting community, they're very conservative, and their views about blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies are quite sort of, let's say, behind the times. But that gives us the benefit of doing a number of other things, which is, for example, setting the display currency for a user is quite straightforward. It's just a simple setting, and then everything that they see would be in, for example, US dollars or euros or pounds or Canadian dollars, whatever it might be. That's a simple setting in the device itself, in the application itself. So the users won't see necessarily anything different from what they're kind of used to with normal accounting software, but underlying that they'll have this other functionality that that they don't get with with traditional accounting software, and that's this ability to transact between any other parties that that have an address on the network as well.
Interesting. So that means for the average user, when they're going to be paying their fees, they'll see their fee for their transactions show up as Canadian dollars in our case, but in the background, it'll be a Totem token transaction type thing?
Yes, so underlying this, we have, and most people don't realize this, but in accounting systems, what you have to do is you have to nominate something called a functional currency. And a functional currency is the currency of record inside your accounting system. And it may not even be the currency that you're using. So to give you an example, you could have a functional currency of US dollar, but you might be doing all of your business in Europe. So you would be doing everything in euro. And what your accountant normally would do would be to convert your euro transactions into the functional currency before producing your financial statements. And the way we see this, and this is, you know, an experiment at this point in time, is we see this is the first time that we can select a functional currency that isn't a fiat currency, and is internal to the accounting system itself. Well, this has never happened before. Nobody's ever conceived of this because they've never had a system that could do exactly this. But we've conceived of this idea. And a functional currency in this sense is just a unit of measure. It's not an amount of currency necessarily. It's just a unit of measure that's used to represent some value in your accounts. So most most people, when they're running their accounting system, they would just think of, as I said in the example that I gave, they would just think of their transactions in euros, but underlying that, or some other step that their accountant would do, he would convert everything to US dollars if that was their functional currency. And in this case, the system will just take care of that for you. It'll automatically do the conversion to the functional currency of the network. There's some additional benefits to that, but it's quite a complex mechanism in itself to explain. But that the flexibility of that is that I can display my accounting records in US dollars or euros or pounds, and it will automatically be converted to the correct exchange rate to the functional currency, and therefore I just have ultimately I just display to myself the currency that I prefer working in. And if for you that's Canadian dollars and for me that's US dollars, then I will see the US dollar amount and you'll see the Canadian dollar amount. But inside the system, it'll be the functional currency of the network.
Wow. Well, I mean, Chris, you've got this really great way of making something like accounting sound very exciting. So it's crazy to think that this is the first time a lot of these things are happening when we take for granted that this is what Web3 is all about. So that's really cool. But another question that I think we want to touch on is, because this is all public ledger, what kind of things are you doing on the Totem side to enforce the privacy of all this information? Because that's probably going to be a big barrier from traditional accounting going into a more decentralized program like this.
Yeah, this is something that we've tried to illustrate on our website, actually, because again, it's a new concept that doesn't exist in accounting, and I'll try and explain that again as kind of briefly as possible. So in a traditional accounting system, you have a centralized ledger, and all of the accounting postings happen in that centralized ledger, and it's a single point of weakness in terms of security. If somebody decides that they want to leak that information outside of a company, then that's what they can do, and they can cause a lot of havoc with that. So privacy is obviously a big a big kind of issue within companies, and I understand that, and there are even legislation around that and regulation around companies ensuring to their customers and suppliers that they're maintaining privacy of information. But the way we look at it is simply that the individual posting records that you might see in an accounting system are essentially aggregated from various parties within your company. So if you have a large company, you may have, I don't know, 10,000 employees, and each one of those employees is essentially, in one way or another, whether it's through the payment of their salary or through the fact that they're working in purchasing or sales, are generating entries in that accounting ledger by just their actions in working in the company. Now, what we can do, and what a blockchain can do, is it can basically say, okay, we assign one address per person. So you could have 10,000 addresses, for example. This sounds a bit crazy when you think, okay, well, how do we regroup all of those addresses into our accounts? And that's a problem that's quite easily solved in cryptography. I won't go into the details of that, but something called a hierarchical deterministic wallet allows you to create sort of trees of addresses that are related to one sort of primary address. But anyway, this tree of addresses looks very much like the organizational structure within a company. So you can see that one maps to the other quite well. By creating individual addresses per employee, what you're doing is you're effectively slicing up your entire accounting ledger into tiny little fractions of information. So by doing that, you're actually no longer having a centralized accounting ledger. You're having perhaps 10,000 individual tiny little ledgers. And these individual ledgers on their own don't leak enough information about the company themselves, even if they were compromised. An interesting thing about this is the larger the company is, the more secure their network becomes, and the more users that we have on our network, the more secure it becomes, simply because individual accounts and individual addresses just relate their information to their peers and nobody else. So if I have an address and my colleague has an address, we don't necessarily have a relationship to each other. We only have relationships external to the company, and only we can see our relationship with the external parties. I couldn't see, for example, my colleague's external relationship with another party and make sense of that unless I had additional information that only comes from inside the company. And by slicing all of the information up into these tiny packets of information, what we have is a system which has privacy built in by default. Essentially, you would not be able to reconstitute any one company's accounts just by looking at the blockchain ledger, because it just wouldn't be possible to do that, especially at scale. So this is a big thing that we have with Totem that will allow us to deal with companies who have a big, strong privacy focus. We're treating their accounts not as a central point of failure, but thousands of tiny pieces of information that can exist on their own, and that only the sort of parties that need to know what all of those pieces are together will be able to see everything together, but nobody else will be able to do that.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds a lot like I guess the term is security through obscurity. There's so much data that you can't link to one party, which is really interesting.
It's not quite security through obscurity, because that's kind of not a good thing to have. What it is it's just the fact that if you combined any two addresses or any three, any four, whatever the combination are, every single address combination will create you a valid set of accounts. But what you can't do is say whether those valid set of accounts are a company or not, because every single combination that exists is a valid set of accounts, and so therefore you wouldn't be able to distinguish who is in the correct set of accounts and who's outside of the correct set of accounts. It just wouldn't be computationally possible to do that.
Interesting. Oh, thank you for clearing that up.
One thing I would like to add is one of the things Chris and I discussed actually previously is that if any company wants further security, like currently the way it is done is that we have a centralized server which stores some of the off-chain information, and we have the blockchain which stores just the core information of the accounting record. So any company that wants for more security, they can technically host their own off-chain application like our dApp. They can take the code from our repositories, they can host it themselves, run it on their own servers, and have the off-chain data only to themselves. So technically they can make it even more secure than our dApp currently offers, if they want to, secure and private.
Yeah, awesome. Just listening to all that, just kind of taking a step back and thinking as how Totem is so transparent and so far ahead with software, and we could assume nowadays a lot of companies might be doing taxes and stuff like that in a unethical way. So would it kind of be a point where companies that use Totem that are very transparent and doing everything very ethical because it's on the blockchain and it's being done correctly and there's no trusted third party, would it almost be kind of at a disadvantage for the beginning, just because in a capitalistic world, a lot of companies that are fudging the numbers and trying to get ahead and competing against each other don't want to be transparent? And I mean, I'm not condoning to be unethical at all. I'm just saying with some companies, eventually they'll probably get caught, but it's a very yeah, like they're just doing whatever they can to compete against this very capitalistic world that we live in. What do you guys think about that?
I think that's a very interesting question. I mean, it's absolutely certain that companies, I mean, I've worked in large organizations for the best part of 20 years, and I can tell you that they make a lot of effort to avoid regulation and to get around rules, embargoes, and whatever. That's just a fact of life. But at the same time, they are required to provide accounting that is correct, and they're audited all the time. So it's a strange question in the sense that they obviously have to comply with all of the regulations that exist. They have to be audited and they have to prove that their records are correct. And at the same time, what they're trying to do is just make them the most out of the rules that exist and work around ones that might be a little bit more vague. A good sort of concept of this is the fact that there are basically two accounting standards in the world. There's one called IFRS, and there's another one called US GAAP. And those two bases for accounting don't agree with each other. They have different sets of rules, and some countries adopt one set and other countries adopt the other set. And the organizations that run those rules have openly stated in their documentation that they've tried to reach an agreement, they haven't been able to reach an agreement, and they don't ever foresee reaching an agreement over what the accounting standards are. So this is sort of a very odd thing that happens, sort of just in general, that there's no real one set of rules that covers everything. I don't know if companies who are actively seeking to avoid the rules would choose Totem. Perhaps not. Perhaps if they wanted to sort of maintain that level of control, they wouldn't do that. On the other hand, you've got governments who want to be able to see what those companies are doing and make sure that they're not breaking the rules, or at least enforce the regulation in some way. So you've got competing levels of interest at quite a powerful level in society. So it's very difficult to say what might happen, but I suspect that for the most part, sort of small operators and small businesses would use Totem because it's just simply a lot easier for them to do their accounting. If, as our mission statement says, we want to take accounting off the to-do list for everyone, then that's something that's very appealing for most businesses. And you have to sort of remember that 50% of the economy is small businesses and small companies. And something like 90% of the workforce that exists are single person traders. So this is the kind of market that we're targeting, rather than perhaps going all in for large companies who might still want to retain control over their ability to work around the regulation.
Yeah, I mean, just makes sense that it's almost like the standard is to have a totem, similar to like how signatures and signed documents could be like an NFT and it wouldn't be trusted if it wasn't an NFT. It's the same as like using totem for accounting, and if a company's not, then you could assume that there's some unethical being done if it's not using totem. It could potentially like shift like that.
Yes, exactly. I mean, these are the kind of things that we would like to happen, obviously, because that then is social pressure against those companies to fall in line with what people expect them to be doing, even if today they're not. So yeah, I totally agree with that point of view.
Awesome. Speaking of government regulations and standards, is Totem planning on having any kind of accreditation standards in place for the standard of, I guess, year-end bookkeeping at a federal level, or I guess maybe more regional as well? Is that something that's in the plans as well, or is this going to be a future kind of see how it goes type thing?
Well, as I said, there are two global competing standards for accounting reporting, and there's no agreement between the two of those. And that opens up potentially the opportunity for a third way of looking at this. And that's to say, well, if you've got a global system that operates in the sense that anybody anywhere could interact and do business with anybody anywhere else in the world at any time, then you probably do need this third standard, which is what we kind of will propose with this system, that would be open and transparent, of course, like everything else that we're doing, but would also be open to discussion and amendment. So ultimately, it would be the community that decides the rules within the accounting system that's most useful for them, and those rules would be enforced by the consensus mechanism of the blockchain anyway. If those need to adapt over time, well, again, the community can decide over how that plays out. But for the most part, I think that we would like to set a third standard that says, okay, this is the way we think things should be done, where there's question marks over the differences between the two existing standards.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. And you're just talking about how the community will decide eventually. So that means it would be Totem eventually would just have like a governance and a council.
Yes, so this isn't entirely clear. We probably will follow the Polkadot model for this.
Okay.
At the initial stages, obviously, we have an administration user that will look after the network as it becomes live and through the early months. But beyond that, we expect it to be fully decentralized governance. And this would, of course, mean not just obviously the coding side of things, but also the governance over the rules that are being implemented on the accounting side as well.
Awesome. And that also means that likely down the road, there will be a mechanism for validation, or I guess even staking of Totem tokens.
We haven't proposed that at this particular stage. This is kind of goes on to the token economics of the current system that we have. So the CAPEX parachain has a very limited quantity of coins that are available to it, and we have a burn mechanism at the moment for transactions. So the fees will be burnt, and that will reduce the overall quantity of coins on the network, which would sort of expose a kind of scarcity aspects to the coin itself. But what we'll find probably in some sort of near term, that depending on the number of transactions that are being executed, perhaps the consumption of coins in the fee burn process may be too much. And if that's the case, then we will introduce sort of incentivized collators on our parachain network, and obviously they're validators. And once we do that, staking would be involved in that process as well. But that's not something that we're doing immediately. That will be something for the future, and we have to sort of just see how things work out in the near term.
Yeah, makes sense. And we have some questions from the community. We had DeFiverse asked, any partnerships or collaborations with Totem coming?
There are a couple of collaborations that we're working on at the moment, mainly within the Polkadot ecosystem, but obviously also outside with exchanges. But that's not something that we can name at this particular point in time. So it's still kind of ongoing for us. But I think the question was more targeted at, do we have any collaborations with existing accounting software companies? I think people like Deloitte or the auditing companies, we haven't yet approached them yet. And that's partly because our product is not fully formed yet. Once we're in the position that the product is pretty much fully formed, then certainly we will look at doing those kind of collaborations.
Okay. And there was another question. It's going to fire this one off right here. Sant Kahim said, what will Totem do to stand out from the rest of other projects that keep popping up in the space? What plans does Totem have to make it the go-to for the business?
Oh, I'm not really sure what they mean by keep popping up in the space. Are we talking about the blockchain space, or are we talking about the accounting space?
I think it was geared toward more of crypto, just how many projects keep popping up every day, and there's just, it's such a crowded space of just random projects and all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of noise out there, and there
Yeah.
has been for years and years, and it is very difficult to establish yourself if you're only focusing on the crypto community. And this is one thing that makes us stand out, I think, probably more than any other projects that are out there, is that we've been focused from day one for the world at large. We're producing a product that anybody can use. It's not specifically crypto. And as I said earlier on, we've kind of pushed the crypto and blockchain wording and terminology to the background so that we can focus on things that people can relate to. And ultimately, that's going to pay benefits when we start engaging with bookkeepers and small businesses. We won't have to explain to them what a cryptocurrency is or a blockchain, because they don't need to know. All they need to know is, how do I sign up? What can I do today? And how does this benefit my business? And that's the direction that we've been going in from day one, and that distinguishes us pretty much from I'm not going to blow my own trumpet here, but pretty much from every other crypto project that's out there.
No, understandable. And even just hearing this now, is there any like ambassador program or any kind of insider program that the community can get involved with to try to, I don't want to say hype Totem, but spread the word and maybe see if they can get some awareness raised, because you're right, this is revolutionary.
I think I'll let Toufiq answer that question, actually, because he's been involved quite a lot in setting up our ambassador program on Telegram, at least.
Well, at the moment, our ambassador program is quite simple, but we obviously want to, enhance it. At the moment, people can, join different national or language communities on Telegram and become ambassadors. That way, it makes it easier for people to communicate and discuss things in their own language. That's what it is now, but we obviously want to enhance it to make the ambassador program more robust and help us spread the word more.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's definitely the best way to go, and we're definitely going to dive into that if we can to get some more information.
Yeah, definitely.
But as well, we wanted to thank you both because I think we're coming up to time. So thank you so much, Chris, Toufiq. We've learned a lot. We had a lot of fun, and we have a lot more questions. So maybe we'll save that for a follow up with you guys.
Yeah,
that'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to do it. Thanks very much. Had a lot of fun.
Perfect. And just before we stop the recording, is there anything that you wanted to just get out there as a last minute thing? Is there any websites you want anybody that's listening to this to go to, or?
So our website is totemaccounting.com. The application on our previous testnet, which is going to be wound down in the coming months, is on totem.live. But that domain name will switch over to the new network as it becomes sort of more fulfilled in terms of development. So those are the two things. And just recently we've announced what our payouts will be on the CapEx parachain and pledge that took place over the last couple of months, and we'll be obviously distributing those tokens in the coming weeks. So that's sort of really exciting for us.
That's awesome.
Yeah, fantastic news. And we'll make sure that we put all the links in the description for this YouTube video and audio as well.
Okay, I think Toufiq wanted to add something there, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess Chris forgot to mention that we actually are giving giving an extra uplift to the referral rewards, which wasn't in our original proposal. So they are getting almost the same uplift, like 34x extra as the original rewards. So basically,
Wow.
for the referral bonus, it instead of it's being really tiny, they will get a really big bonus. And the total referral rewards, the extra amount is close to 1% of the total supply.
Wow. So anybody that didn't take part, they're probably going to be kicking themselves right now for that.
I mean, technically, we actually kept the referral program so easy to participate. I mean, we were expecting almost everyone to participate, but some people probably didn't know, and they might regret it now.
Yeah, no, I can definitely name a few people that are probably regretting it. But either way, thank you guys so much. We really liked it. We really hope to talk to you guys again soon. And until then, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Cool. Great speaking to you too.
Yeah,
Take
great
care.
speaking to you too.
Thanks for joining us on block number 2 of the podcast. We would like to again thank Chris and Toufiq for taking time to sit down with us and talk about their incredible project. They're so close to finishing.
It really sounds revolutionary, as it could change a lot regarding how businesses interact with each other and remove the traditional third party with software that can also enhance the bottom line.
We would also like to thank the Totem community for submitting questions through Twitter in anticipation of this podcast. You can find our Twitter handle in the description of this video to do the same for upcoming podcasts and get engaged. We're learning so much every time we make a new episode, and there's just a lot going on in Web3 space. So we really hope you learned something too while listening.
Absolutely. And we'll have all the links below so that you can learn more about Totem, and we definitely encourage you to check them out.
And as always, I'm Cooper,
And I'm Arrow.
and we'll see you in the next episode of Let's Talk NodeSense.